Now, I know that you all have two wonderful lawmakers here in your club, so I don't have to go through all this, but it is a reminder. We're 1 year out. The elections got pretty exciting last week as far as some of the things we may see over the next year with the filings that will happen in April. The 13th was the last day to change parties with the law that requires you to be in a political party 6 months prior to the beginning of the filing period in the state of Oklahoma. As that will happen in April, the 13th was the last day for people to change parties. These will be the people who will be on the ballot. The senators, Senator Halligan had the pleasure of only being on the ballot every other election cycle because senators serve a 4-year term. Representatives, on the other hand, are on the ballot every single time should they draw an opponent. I was fortunate. Of my 6 races, I drew an opponent 2 times, actually had a person file on the next election, what would have been my 3rd race, but they were ineligible to run, so I challenged and had that person removed from the ballot. Then my final 3 races in the legislature, I didn't draw opponents. And that's one of the best feelings that you can have, knowing that no one in your district either wants to run against you or doesn't feel they can beat you. And so that really is just a good feeling, knowing that at least a significant portion of your district believes in your mission. And then we have our 5 members of Congress. Unfortunately, with the census count this last year, we did not pick up that 6th seat, which we lost several terms ago. It would have been nice, and I think we were close. We were 55,000 short of 4 million on our census count. When you think about the count happening during a pandemic, it's pretty amazing that we were able to achieve that goal. But we are working to make sure that in 10 years, we will be prepared for that next census count and hopefully do a much better job of ensuring that everyone who lives in the state is counted and that we can try and get that congressional district back. Now, every 4 years, we have our statewide elected officials, and you see the list of them there. That's the slate of the races that will be eligible to be on the ballot in 2022. And then we have 6-year terms for the corporation commissioners and our 2 U.S. senators that are staggered. Here's the breakdown for a House and the Senate, and these are the individuals we primarily work with when it comes to shaping the policies. The 101 members of the House, and you can see the Republicans have controlled the House since 2004. The breakdown is 82 Republicans, 19 Democrats, and the presiding officer is Speaker Charles McCall. In the Senate, 48 members, 4-year staggered terms, and they're based on odd-numbered districts and even-numbered districts on which one they will fall on the election cycle. The current breakdown, 39 Republicans, 9 Democrats. The president is President Pro Tem Greg Treat. And then, just like the federal system, the Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate. The same in Oklahoma. Our Lieutenant Governor is the President of the Senate, and that's Matt Pinnell. When it comes to reading a bill, it's important to understand what you're looking for. At the filing period, which drafting is happening right now, and they will have their drafting deadline coming up in December, and then the public filing of the bills will happen in January. The lawmakers that file these different pieces of legislation will consult with the legislative staff, and their ideas will be drafted into one of different 4 formats. It'll either be a bill, a joint resolution, a concurrent resolution, or a simple resolution. Now, the bills have the force and effect of law. That's well over 90% of the items that are filed by lawmakers, the changes that they want to suggest for each session of the legislature. They must be passed by both chambers. They must be signed by the governor, except when it refers a question to a vote of the people. And as I said, it generally proposes changes to the Oklahoma statutes. The joint resolutions are very similar, but generally they will propose either something to go on the ballot or something that would be a temporary change that would have the force and effect of law. The concurrent resolutions and simple resolutions are expressing simply the opinion of either both bodies with the concurrent or of one body with the simple resolution. First resolution I worked on was back when I was a first-year staffer, asking Calvin Anthony, the state representative for this area, to file a resolution recognizing some college students who were doing great work in the community. That's just one example of what a lawmaker could file with a resolution. You can see a wide myriad of ideas, either memorializing Congress to take action or the federal government, which we've seen more of in recent years, or just bringing recognition. I had the distinct pleasure of filing the resolution recognizing Eddie Sutton, when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Still one of the greatest honors I had to have Coach come to the Capitol and speak to the lawmakers and talk about his history and the work he had done to overcome the demons he faced. So those opportunities are a wonderful way that lawmakers can just bring that recognition to people in the state who are deserving of an honor. Now, when you get to the bills, there are several different stages that you'll see. The introduced version is the idea the lawmaker has to propose the initial suggestion of what should be a law change. So they come up with this idea in consultation with club members, with people at the coffee shop, wherever it might be. At my local coffee shops in Rush Springs, we solved all the world's problems each morning and created a few new ones. So those ideas that come from those discussions, lawmakers often will take to the Capitol and make a recommendation on something that should change in the law. After the introduced version, it will be filed and then it will be referred to a committee in the legislature. The committee, if it's decided that the chair wants to hear that bill, will bring it up. Once it's passed out, it's the committee version. From there, it goes to the floor leader. The floor leader will schedule it if the floor leader wants to. And then once it's considered by the legislature, it's considered the engrossed version. From there, it could go to a conference committee if the House and Senate do not get along. I know the senator and the representative always get along, so they would never have a conference committee version. But if there is a situation where senator and representative with their bodies can't reach agreement, this is where the bill will go to try and find that consensus. Once they've achieved that, then it becomes the enrolled version. That means it rolls out of the legislative branch to the executive branch for the governor to take action on that. Once the governor takes action, or if the legislature decides they want to override a veto of the governor, then it becomes law. Now, the bills can do 4 different types of things. They can create a new law, they can amend an existing law, they can repeal an existing law, or they can appropriate money or set budgetary limits. Now, here's the timeline of what we're looking at. January, lawmakers are getting ready for session. They all are excited to see each other. They're looking forward to being back together. That lasts a few days. And then the real work starts and grumbling happens. Bills get killed. Things just happen along the way. And the mood gets a little bit more contentious over those 4 months that the legislature is meeting in session. So February, March, April, and May, they're working on the policies. After session, they're very happy to be away from each other. And that's when the fiscal year starts and the budget bill that has to be passed. And truly, it is the only constitutional requirement the legislature must do each and every year. They have to go through, pass that budget bill. It kicks into effect July 1st. And then they will go through the interim study process, which is what's happening right now, where lawmakers will meet in official meetings to discuss ideas of what they think would be a good policy to suggest for the next year, or an update on something that could possibly have been in effect. They schedule these meetings to just reacclimate to the system and get ready for the next legislative session and decide if it's worth running a piece of legislation that might be discussed in one of those studies. J. Kevin Stitt's our current governor. He was elected to a 4-year term. He is in his first term, could serve in his second term, depending upon what the voters do in 2022. He is the head of state and chief executive officer for the state. He is also our commander-in-chief for the Oklahoma National Guard. He appoints with the confirmation, cabinet secretaries, and various agencies, and he delivers a yearly state of the state on the first Monday in February with the convening of the first official day of the legislative session. The governor can do 4 different things with bills, which is a unique system of what we have here in Oklahoma. The governor, of course, can sign a bill or approve a measure by signing it within 5 days of receipt. He can veto the measure, returning it to the legislature within 5 days of the receipt with objections. He must submit the reason for the veto. Now, it can be, I don't like the paper this bill is printed on. It doesn't have to be a legitimate excuse. It just has to have a message on there. And we've seen some creative messages in the past. So the governor must return that to the legislature, and they have the opportunity going up until the adjournment of the legislature to override that veto. They would have, if it passed by a majority vote, the opportunity to override it by a 2/3 vote. The motion they would make is, I move House Bill 1517 become law, notwithstanding the objections of the governor. That way, it's always phrased in the positive. And so a yes vote means they want that to become law, and the no vote means they don't want that to become law. So it reverses the process for that by people thinking, well, the veto, if they yes, they want that to not become effect. So they try and keep it with parliamentary procedure, always in the affirmative and always positive with the way they phrase their motions. The governor also in Oklahoma has the opportunity for pocket passage. If it's passed and received prior to the final days of the legislature, the governor can simply let that sit on his desk, and if he does not take action, it automatically will become law. It's happened a few times when the governor may have a personal objection to something, but realizes something should go into effect. And so they have that opportunity. Now in Oklahoma, we also have the pocket veto, that if the governor receives it in the final 5 days of the legislative session, the governor can let it sit on the desk for 15 days. And if he does not take action on it, it's automatically vetoed. And the governor also will have the opportunity to line item sections only in an appropriations bill. That's the only type of legislation where the governor can go through and pick and choose. Everything else, the governor has to either sign it completely or veto it completely. Here's a breakdown of the structure of the court. Just a lot of people are really not sure how the court system is set up. So here is what I've seen as the best chart of how our court sits. And we do have a very unique court system with 9 justices on the Supreme Court, 5 judges on the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. And notice I said justices and judges. Only members of the Supreme Court are justices at the state and federal level. Everyone else is a judge. And Oklahoma has immediate jurisdiction with respect to new first impression cases, important legal issues, and cases of great public interest. And the judgments of the Oklahoma Supreme Court with respect to the Oklahoma Constitution are considered final. Now, looking at what OICA does and the mission that we have on trying to raise awareness on policies, we were created in 1983 as a result of the Terry D. lawsuit. That was a lawsuit against the Department of Human Services, where Legal Aid of Western Oklahoma challenged the actions, what DHS was doing with those young people who were incarcerated in the system that DHS at that time oversaw. The court saw fit to rule against DHS and demanded changes happen. The legislature went through and implemented significant changes, breaking up DHS into several agencies, the creation of the Office of Juvenile Affairs to handle those justice-involved kids, dividing up some of the services of what DHS did. They created the Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth to oversee DHS as a watchdog state agency. So if anyone ever has a problem with the way DHS is doing their job or caseworkers, they can file a complaint with OCCY. They will investigate the case to see if there is any validity to the allegations. They also saw fit that an entity needed to be created to raise awareness about policies. So we wouldn't ever let it slide back to that again. We needed an entity that was a nonprofit organization to be a very loud voice for children. And with that, OICA was created. For those of you that keep up with the state and government, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Mariana Paula, was one of our 5 founders of our organization. And we take with great pride that history and the work that we try to do each and every year to ensure that the policies that pass, the laws that are considered by the legislature are in the best interests of Oklahoma's youth. These were just some of the bills that we worked on this year. And you'll see in the white, these were some of the bills that we supported. In the red, some of them that we opposed. It works both ways. On our scorecard this last year, we had 15 bills that we supported, and we had 4 that we were opposed to. And we had some that worked their way through the system. Representative Ranson had one that didn't make it all the way through the system. It's a carryover that's on our agenda of what we would like to see passed next year. But you can just see some of these ideas of what we pushed. The last 2 on this page, 1709 and 1773, were ones that we aggressively pushed and asked these legislators to take action on this. 1709 was dealing with federal legislation that came down with funding from the Chafee Act, which supports foster youth who are aging out of the system. Congressman Mullen filed this legislation at the federal level at our request, pushed for that, and part of it was implemented in the budget bill. And that money came back to Oklahoma, and this was the enabling legislation to make those changes to ensure those dollars were spent the right way. Representative Conley's bill created a multi-tiered systems of support training effort for teachers to understand more trauma and situations where hopefully we will get students the help that they need with counseling or sitting down rather than going to the point where the student would be suspended. With suspensions, if you look at the numbers and the stats, it truly can be a pipeline to prison. When you start off with those kids believing they're bad by suspending them, it leads to an effort where those kids are often in trouble, continue to be in trouble, become involved in the system, end up as a visitor to OJA, and then as an inmate in our correction system. This is something where we are taking this very serious, trying to get that help early on and do those preventative measures. And so much of the work we do is preventative, which is often hard to explain. Here are some of the other bills that we worked on. There were a couple of the doozies we did not like. And we also have these interim studies that are going through the process right now. Our work truly is year-round, working with the legislators during those 4 months and the months leading up to session to file bills, but also working on these different ideas. I've testified at 2 interim studies so far this summer, working on issues such as suicide prevention. We have one, causes of the death of young Oklahomans. We're looking at policies that may be of some help to try and reduce the number of deaths that we see. And here is just some of the information I have. I'll pay my dollar as a Rotarian from Bricktown for advertising. $3. I'll pay that just so y'all can see how we fund this. We have about a $450,000 annual budget that pays for 5 staffers that work in the office, 2 contract employees that work with us at the Capitol to monitor legislation, and then help subsidize the 2 conferences that we run. Our fall forum begins next week, which is our policy conference that we use to shape our legislative agenda. We have advocates from all around the state assemble to discuss ideas and make suggestions of what should be in our legislative agenda. Thanks to several generous donors this year, attendance to the conference is completely free for advocates. They provided enough support where we could give away, and our goal was 365 free spots. We just hit that on Tuesday. And so we're going to provide those scholarship tickets to individuals to come together. We don't want cost to be a barrier, and this is a way we can have all of those people signed up. And we're inviting every youth program in the state who wants to be a part of this conference. Just contact me and we will give you a ticket so you can be on that 4-day Zoom discussion in the mornings, which will be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Monday, and make sure your voice is heard on those issues you feel are important and should be brought up to the legislature. Likewise, we do another conference in February that's called our Legislative Learning Lab, and that is a breakdown on the state process of government and the legislative process for beginners and people who want a refresher. We go through those 4 days doing different workshops with experts. Current and former lawmakers are involved, and we do a deep dive into the process about what does the appropriations timeline look like? What is the committee process? Just basically every aspect that an advocate who wants to be involved in shaping the process can be involved and learn how to best use their voice. And there's my information. I promised I would leave enough time for questions. Dr. Halligan hasn't gotten up yet, so I've got a couple of minutes. So if you have questions, and I know there are some people on Zoom, or at least they told me there are thousands of people watching this right now. 3? I was close. 3,000. Fantastic. That made my $3 worth it. I want to open up Dr. Halligan. Our major source of funds. That's a great question. With some of the foundations in the state support us. Inasmuch Foundation provides us $20,000 in operational expenses support. This year, George Kaiser Family Foundation also gave us 20. We have several other foundations that will give us a wide range. Those are the top ones. So we'll probably bring in about a quarter of our budget from foundation support. We have our annual banquet called the Heroes Ball that we have had to hold virtually the last couple of years. We did do it partially in person this year, and that brings in about a quarter of our budget. And the rest of it, it's flashbacks to the old campaign days. It's dialing for dollars, just asking people to support us. Lori Williams, a good friend of mine from Ardmore, called me today, and we have our chili cook-off that happens in a couple of weeks. We have a golf tournament next month, and she's doing a $5,000 sponsorship for us. And she was a law student intern for Legal Aid of Western Oklahoma during the Terry D lawsuit. So she's always felt very passionate about our work. And so she's just one of those individual donors who's generous and supports us. But a lot of my day is spent on call time, reaching out to people. And as I said, it's tough to sell advocacy. People that have a direct service mission, those organizations, they can show that direct benefit of an individual who has received that support. With us, most of our work is through the laws and preventative in nature. And so it's harder to sell that, but the people who are involved in the process and the system understand the need for that. And we're coming up on 40 years, and I would hate to think of an Oklahoma that didn't have a program like OICA that would be that voice for kids at the Capitol. Plus, I don't want to be a greeter at Walmart yet. Yes, sir. That's a great question. Of the bills that I brought up in this chart, how many passed, how many are still pending, how many died? Of the 18 that we saw, 15 passed into law. We were directly involved with about 4 or 5. Some of them we get involved later on with the request of the authors, or they're just organically filed by lawmakers based on ideas from constituents. And so we lend support to that. And it's like the old Gene Stipe saying, we go to the author and say, does our support help or hurt the bill? Which one do you want us to do? So sometimes we have to know our audience, and our support may not help with some authors or some lawmakers. 15 made it through. We had a couple that we were successful in generating enough opposition where it didn't come to the floor or didn't pass. We had one, House Bill 2899, that did pass, signed by the governor, but it tied in with a requirement from the federal government, and the agency at the federal government decided to not allow that to go into effect. We joined in with several other organizations to speak out about that issue of what we felt was a problem that could impact Oklahoma's children. And so it's a wide variety. Usually it's not a hard sell to go to lawmakers and say, this is a pro-child piece of legislation. Most of those ideas get through. The hardest part is to make sure that all of the ideas we want get through. Just like Representative Ranson's bill, it ran out of time. It's a carryover bill for this year. And so we're hoping that with that effort, we will convince the rest of the legislators to see fit to bring that bill back up, along with several others. And then we'll have an entire new slate of bills filed. We'll have about 2,000 bills probably filed this year. And so the carryover, the second session is always tougher because we're working on those bills that were left over from last year and all the new ones. And so we're going to stay busy in the middle of a filing period in April, which a lot of the lawmakers get a little paranoid because they're worried that some of their actions might generate an opponent. And so it's a little bit of a freeing moment after filing if a lawmaker doesn't draw an opponent, and they can continue their work. And so it's an interesting discussion and view of sociology and just how those lawmakers act before and after. Yes, sir. Fantastic program, or fantastic question, a fantastic program that you mentioned with CASA. There are several different organizations statewide in nature that have a specific mission. CASA, with the court-appointed special advocates, they work in the courtroom to ensure those kids who are in the system facing that judge, going through a court hearing, have an advocate who can speak up for their interest. We have the Child Advocacy centers that are throughout the state. Those are the centers where kids who are taken into custody by law enforcement because of some situation that's happened at home, they're taken in to do a forensic interview. and that interview is taped and can be used as admissible evidence in court. We have youth services organizations throughout the state that provide a myriad of services for young people. I think there were 39 youth services organizations in the state right now. We work with all of them. Sometimes they will have a lobbyist, sometimes they don't. We work with them to try and connect them with the lawmakers to make sure that their needs are met with, if it's a policy issue, and they can get in front of the lawmakers. So in layman's terms, it's almost like we're a lobbying organization for these other youth programs to be able to have their voice heard and the kids that they serve, their needs met when it comes to a policy issue. And so we have regular meetings with those organizations frequently throughout the year. They're all in attendance at our fall forum. And then we do a bi-weekly luncheon or Zoom discussion with all of those programs. So every 2 weeks during the legislative session, we can all come together and discuss what bills are going through, get their input, and then direct our lobbyists to help them out. Thank you all for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you so much.